It goes without saying that as a Spurs fan, you can't get any good news without a whole dollop of terribleness alongside it. And it's happened again. Of course it has. As we hear that our vital spine of Romero, Van de Ven, and Solanke are all approaching fitness time for our Europa League last 16 first leg against AZ Alkmaar tomorrow night. We're also given the picture we never wanted to see, but we half expected to see, as our best player of the season, Deki Kulusevski, put a shot out on Instagram of himself in a protective boot with an ankle injury, looking likely to derail the rest of his season. I'll be discussing all of this and more with Jorri as we ask ourselves, will Deki's injury mean the end of our trophy hopes? Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, please do press that like button. Please do subscribe to the channel, getting closer to 15,000 subscribers. I'm also doing this live on Big Up today, so if you're on Big Up, get involved in the chat. But most importantly, Jorri, how are you, mate?
I'm good, Barnaby. How about yourself?
Yes, very good. It's been a long time, but good to have you back on the channel. So let's get straight into it. I've mentioned Deki Kulusevski. We'll get on to that because it feels like at the moment there are some kind of conflicting reports, some saying he's definitely out for the first leg of Alkmaar and then Bournemouth, but some people also suggesting he could be out for a lot longer. But really, because I haven't spoken to you for so long, I wanted to ask how you feel about where Spurs are right now with, 2.5 months left of the season. Is there any positivity left in you, Jorri?
Sure. I think I sent you a message a couple of weeks back, or maybe a couple of months back now, saying I've never flip-flopped as much in my life in regards to anything as with Anne's tenure. So, the way I feel about Spurs in general is that, for me, tactically, Anne's is not, he's not going to deliver. I don't think, I think Anne's is I'm pretty convinced Anne's is a system manager. His system does work for lower league stuff. It doesn't work at this level. That's what my opinion is. On the other hand, I do think that Ans has a lot of experience with the running of club and the running of football matters, and also developing, especially maybe young talent. And we're seeing definitely positive things happening in that regard. Also, there's no, you shouldn't really fear the crisis, because the crisis will reveal the underlying problems, and that's once again, we've been through this many times, but once again it becomes even more clear how much of whether you're leaving in or out or whatever, becomes more clear how much effort and staffing is geared toward the commercial side and is lacking in terms of the football side. It's also like a simple one is like our medical department, which we for years have had various kind of hints that they weren't up to scratch, and now it's come a little bit full circle, and now that we can't pretend that we don't know that this part of our club is all right, and so in that regard, and especially I would say especially because how they've how the board and stuff have reacted towards the last part of the window, and since then, basically, my theory on this, Barnaby, is that they didn't do anything at the start because they were actually looking for that big name savior to kind of come in and make everything all right in the fan base again, and nobody was available for them, so they had to kind of stick to hands and try and back that. Right. And for me, I think I actually think that's the better option in this term, and not that I my biggest problem with sticking with Ants at that point was the injury stuff. I was scared that that's gonna run riot through the squad. It's not only gonna cause injuries, but if this is systematic and institutionalized, then your key players are gonna want out, basically, and simply because they have to protect their career as well, and So that was my main kind of reasoning for not keeping him around. But I do think that we should. I mean, I would be surprised if we're not through the worst of it. But now Decky, you never know. This is also my biggest kind of problem with Ant, whether I think his football can work or not. There's plenty of good stuff, but it's the inconsistency and the chaos, and it's the management of the whole thing. And that's not only on Ants, that's the staff, that's the board, and all of that. But Ants is adding to that problem, I feel. But you were also looking for positives. So the positives for me is, once again, I think we have one of the best young squads around, to be honest. I do not agree with people out there that are very critical and say we don't have the players, we're at the starting point of a project. This core, you can pick your favorites here and there, but the core of it, if we can manage to keep them around and add to them a little bit of seniority, is going to be a real force to be reckoned with if we get the right consistent and experienced management in there. I'm not saying Ants is not that, but then that's another thing, Barnaby, that I've been thinking is like, could Ants maybe himself evolve through all of this? Could he himself? And there's been signs of that, but also like when he went to the back three and stuff like that, that showed very bad kind of tactical nouns there and very bad preparation for that, I thought. But the situation was kind of desperate, but I don't know.
Can I ask you one question, Jorri? Because I feel like a lot of, as you will know as much as anybody, there are some very staunch Ange Postecoglou fans who will be screaming at the screen and saying, so let me ask you, in terms of what we've seen from Manchester City this season after they lost Rodri and then they had a couple more injuries, I think a lot of the people who are staunch Ange Postecoglou fans will say, well, look, you're talking about Manchester City who've spent more money than anybody, well, probably bar Chelsea in the last, but overall more money than anyone. They've got the strongest squad. They've, spent 60 million pounds, probably 40 times on players. And then they've had 3 or 4 injuries and they've dropped like a stone. And those fans will probably be saying what Ange Postecoglou's been saying in his press conferences, which is, if you saw at least our performances at the beginning of the season, we should have been, we showed performances which were able to win some big games and should have won more games than we did. And, as we start getting our players back, we will be back to the best Ange Postecoglou Spurs team that we have seen. How would you reply to people who said that?
I think it's a little bit. I do kind of agree with the Man City comparison, and of course we're going to get better. The injuries have, of course, been the key factor to dropping our levels, but I'm, of course, myself convinced that it's because of handball. It's because of fatigue, and people have even talked about, like, now we have another ankle injury, and Solanke had an ankle injury, and people were like, "Oh, that was after practice, and he was just taking some shots and stuff like that."
No, that's his knee. Solanke did his knee, didn't he?
Knee. Okay, sorry, but it was after practice, and it was just like free kick. And what I'm no medical expert or anything, but I do know that when players are fatigued and when people are fatigued, you relax your muscles in situations where you shouldn't be relaxing. You're not providing the same amount of support in various. I mean, I don't think this is it, but I'm just saying, like, the fatigue will always lead this way. The fatigue is the kind of systematic issue at the heart of the injury crisis. There's also, of course, the medical board, how they, we can see with Harry Kane, it wasn't until Harry Kane basically just took it upon himself to take responsibility, went out and got the outside advice and just basically took over the responsibility for his own health, that he stopped having all these injuries, and so so that's not basically on Ants. On the contrary, actually, Ants has kind of exposed that and demanded better, which is great, But I would say even when we've had our best teams out there, we've still been not looking great, apart from the odd game, and those games have been where the players have had full warrior fight spirit in them, and they go out and do it. But the problem, and that's great also to see, but that's something I know as a supporter of many small teams who kind of rely on that, is that that's not going to last. They cannot go a full season on that. You can go a couple of games, a tournament at the most, but not more than that. You're always going to burn out on that. And what I want to see in this club is consistency. And the problem is, even our best games, our defensive structure looks awful. Even when we're playing good defense, it's more down to individual effort, individual running, than the actual formation and tactical play, in my view. The whole thing, I mean, we know this, the whole thing with the double invert is basically over. We don't get any advantage. Nobody's going to be surprised by that anymore, which means we don't have that possession overload, possession over
like more bodies in
that we had in those first 10 games. What we can't dominate now by is running. Sometimes when they have had the rest, we're able to outrun teams and just and that's kind of what you saw in Man City game, for example. Even though we didn't get it over the line, it was still, you saw that come into play there
in the second half.
And so and that, for example, is fantastic, that we're one of the best running teams when we're not grounded to the fatigue levels that we have been. But for me, what I really wish to see now, and I remember one of our videos, I kind of gave you my lowest common denominator for success, which was to see through the project. And now, rightfully many would say I've completely flip-flopped on that and reneged on that. But the only reason for that was because I became absolutely convinced that with Ants, and it's not only on Ants, it's the combination of having a really young squad, which is going to introduce a lot of chaos, not qualified enough staffing in the club, and a board that's not consistent enough either. All of those factors together is going to make for a very inconsistent, chaotic environment, in my view. But Ants also, like at that point, I was and have been for a while convinced that Ants is not going to be able to get us out of the fatigue hole that we went in. Actually, we're going to go deeper and deeper. Now we've had some breaks and a little bit time to rest. Now we get to see if it starts up again. If we start gaining strength and fitness, because they would be amazing, because now all the other teams are falling off. Now they're in the red zone soon, and that would be amazing if we could use that. But if we start seeing the same pattern again, then it's bad times, I fear,
So let me ask you then, Jorri, what do you actually, you kind of foresaw, I think, a lot of what has happened over the last probably 2 or 3 months. I'm not sure if any of us suggested we would go down as far as 15th place, but that is where we ended up. And then obviously we've had 3 wins in the Premier League out of our last 4. So where do you foresee us now going forward in terms of this Europa League run especially? Because I'm sure you've seen some of my videos and I've been pretty transparent about how I just think now we should be resting players for our Europa League run. There's no danger of us getting relegated. I don't think there's much danger of us qualifying for Europe via the league places either. So certainly in terms of those players who have struggled with fitness all season, I think we should be resting them, giving them maybe 20 minutes here and there in the Premier League to get them up to fitness, and then play them in the Europa League, probably starting in that second leg. Where do you foresee us? I mean, do you foresee us doing that? Do you think Ange will do that? And also, can you see us going on a deep run into that Europa League kind of semi-final or final? Or do you think realistically we might come a cropper against AZ Alkmaar or Eintracht Frankfurt or Ajax if we get past Alkmaar?
No, I think we're quite rightly one of the. I think officially we're the favorite to win it, but I think we're rightly quite one of the favorites. And we can not easily, but we can win it. I definitely believe we can win it. But if we see the same kind of pattern emerge now, once we get into it again, then I'm afraid we won't be able to.
As in, if we pick up more injuries, you mean?
If the fatigue factor starts becoming, because now we're down to so few games, and if we're not able to, and to answer your other question about resting for Europa, yes, if fatigue was a factor, then I would, of course, we have to do that. Europa, even for the board, Europa should be the priority now, because it's the best chance to get a European football next year. And so I would say definitely we should do that. But we're in a period now, and if there's anything to our club and to the whole management in general, all the coaches, and everybody, medical, everything, we are supposed to be able to manage this easily without creating a fatigue crisis. If we create a fatigue crisis with two competitions going, where all the teams are starting to get tired, then there's something seriously wrong with how we're running this squad, and that's kind of my suspicion as well. But I also do agree. I do feel like I was maybe, even though I think Ange owns a lot of the reason for all these injuries, I also think maybe whether it's luck or not, maybe there was more bad luck than I wanted to admit at the point, but also that given what he had, there wasn't as much room to manage it in many ways as but there was some stuff, and the most famous is of course one of maybe our best player right now, which is called Jet Spence. He could have been in there a lot sooner, and we would have been able to protect our fullbacks.
There are two arguments for that, though, aren't there, Jorri? And we'll never know what the truth is. There's the argument that, yes, Ange Postecoglou should have played him earlier because we all see how good he is on the pitch, and that is a fair and valid argument. But the other argument, which I think Ange even tried to talk about in one of his press conferences, like he had to make Jed Spence prove himself over a elongated period of time until he was good and ready, which just so happened to be when we got injuries.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, and that's a convenient coincidence right there. But I don't buy it, Barnaby. I saw him before he came to Spurs. He was great then. I saw him the little he got to play. And he looked pretty good as well. And to be honest, I do feel like in regards to Jet's one of those ego kind of star kind of personalities, and he's not gonna kowtow or bow to anyone. He probably went too far with it and rubbed Conte first the wrong way, and then Ange after that,
and Daniel Farke at Leeds.
Yeah, and probably also staff in the club and coaches and all of that, because there seems to have been a consensus around that Jet shouldn't have the opportunity. But this is also, we know this just from our own workplaces. If there's some asshole that comes in and is really good at what he does, but an absolute asshole and doesn't really show too much respect to the others around them, well, then everybody gets up against you, and that. I'm not saying we should let him go. He needs to become a team player for sure. But I do think there's a lot more of this kind of social politics rather than actual ability and playing ability. He's always
I don't know if with Spence. I don't know if with Spence necessarily kind of trying to read between the lines of all of the reports about him. I don't know if it's that he's an arsehole or has been an arsehole. I think it's more just that like he's kind of almost like, I don't know, maybe like super socially awkward or shy or something, but also that maybe comes with some maybe like time issues and
I think you're right
responsibility
there.
issues.
I'm just speculating, but looking at the interviews and stuff like that, I never thought Spence is an asshole. By the way, I'm projecting what their reaction, like how he would rub people the wrong way. But I actually think Spence is probably the kind of shy, a little bit insecure guy that kind of hides behind a facade of arrogance and toughness, which is not doing him any service really. But he's learning that now, and I think with this success also the shyness will lessen and the insecurity will lessen, and he will become more of a just integrated team player.
Yeah, so my point with Spence is I hope he doesn't kind of get to the end of this season, because I think he's about to probably get called up for the England squad as well. I hope he doesn't get to the end of the season and think that's it. I've done it now. I've made it. And what he'll need to do is push on again, because the Premier League is so ruthless that players will get used to what he does and they'll learn and they'll pick it up. And so he needs to do that again. But yes, he's been incredibly impressive this season. Just want to ask you, kind of, this is almost like a hypothetical best case scenario. Where do you think Ange will be with Daniel Levy if, we finish, say, 12th or 10th to 12th, but we make it to the Europa League final, but we don't win it? I think, in a weird way, that puts Levy in the most difficult position of all.
Yeah, I would kind of agree with you there. But I do think, Barnaby, that the board and Levy really they would like another manager. And it made sense to me, not whether it was true rumors or not, but when the rumors came out, who was it? The Italian manager? I forgot him now.
The Italian one. I thought the one that they were talking about was Allegri. Oh, I didn't see that one. Okay.
Oh, there was some, and there were pretty heavy rumors that there were some talks about from Tottenham with Allegri, and like I think I talked to Ben on We Are Tottenham TV about it. It's like, Allegri, come on, we just built a great front foot squad, but if you think about it from a businessman's point of view, what you want is consistency. You want something to be able to plan your business on, and being top 4 every year is that what you want, and that's where Mourinho, Conte, all of these defensive managers make sense from Daniel Levy's point of view, because if I don't give them the top players, they might not win anything. But even if I give them a kind of a mixed bag squad, they'll get me the results I need, and I do think that Ange, for example, to get back to the question, it's too wild, it's too chaotic for Levy's taste. Levy is the most conservative chairman in the league, maybe in Europe. I do not think he's enjoying these up and downs, to be honest. So I do think that if we as a fan base give them an excuse, then they won't. They will. I think the biggest problem for the board right now is that there's no takers. Nobody wants to come near this club of the big names. I think
that might be different in the summer. I would have thought.
In the summer it might be different, because then you have the budget, and also we might look a little bit less of a mess at that point, and so on. So it might be different, and of course, money will cure any such problems. If you just throw enough money at it, it will be fine. But
I've said
But
it.
yeah,
I've said it a lot. I've said it a lot on my channel, but I don't think I've spoken to you about it. I really feel like Ange's biggest friend right now is Ruben Amorim, because what's happened at Manchester United since Amorim has gone in, and obviously Amorim was the one that everyone wanted around Europe, the most sought after manager. He's gone into a club where it's rotten to the core in terms of, especially in terms of squad building, but also the pressure that is put on those players. And he hasn't been able to. In fact, he hasn't been able to change it. He's made it worse. And therefore, I'm like, well, I think that has become Big Ange's best friend. I just wonder, is what you're saying then, basically in answer to my initial question, that you think Ange will go unless we win the Europa League?
I can't even say that, Barnaby, because there could be I think Levy is very scared of letting him go and upsetting the fans, So I do think that dynamic is, if we're very, like, let's say we get to the final but don't win, but we're super happy about how we went about it, and we can see something, and we believe, like, the majority is there at the end of the season, then I think they would be wary to do it, maybe. But I do think that, yes, if they deem the time to be ripe for that PR, for them to get that over with the fans, and the optics, as you like to say, is going to be all right for them, then they will pull the trigger. Yeah, and if they have the candidate, I truly think they really gave it a real shot January, and there was simply, like, if they come in with we have to remember as well, Ans was, nobody knew who this guy was. He was a fifth or sixth or seventh choice on the list, and now we're probably gonna go even further down the list. And yeah, there might be a new Pochettino there at some point, and so on. But, like, this is not, we have the stadium of a giant club, but now we're fighting, lower league, bottom of the league clubs for manager names and so on, So I really think they're scared of that kind of a dynamic playing out.
Let me ask you one more question. That's just, yeah, go on. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I do think there might be a chance that there is some work being put into look at getting Potts back, to be honest, in the summer. I do think.
I just don't see how that happens with him taking America to the World Cup, though.
I do. I know. I mean, they have to be working on it now if it's going to have a chance at all, like as a contingency. And I do think that Potts he would basically drop basically anything to get that chance. And also, I have not been a fan of getting Potts back, but that's because we were stuck in getting top four and all of that. Now, a lot of things have been revealed, a lot of things have collapsed, and now we know. For me, now the game is about getting back to our post Potts levels again, and then we can hopefully push on for that. Like, thinking about going for leagues and big titles and stuff like that, that's completely off the board. We just need to get back to where we were with Conte, and in terms of league position and competitiveness. So, yeah.
Let me just ask this. So, one kind of manager who doesn't get talked about a lot in terms of what he's achieved in the Premier League is Unai Emery. And and when I say not to talk about, I mean basically in terms of Tottenham fans. When Tottenham fans talk about a possible next manager, and I'm not talking about Unai Emery becoming next Tottenham manager, what I'm talking about is when Tottenham fans talk about potential next managers, we automatically, I think, are led to think about who can be our next Pochettino, as you just alluded to. Who can be the kind of young, exciting manager who comes in and grows with the squad and kind of outperforms the budget, basically. But what we don't talk about a lot is how Emery, who is a provenly successful manager in Europe at winning Europa Leagues, especially having won, I think, 2 or 3 at Seville, obviously then had a difficult time at Arsenal, but I think it was proven after he left that actually everyone was having a difficult time because they were in a rebuild, because Arteta came 8th twice. Should we more be looking at a manager from around Europe who has succeeded who maybe isn't quite as much of a disciplinarian as Conte and Mourinho, but who has succeeded elsewhere over time and could therefore take us to the next level? Or is Emery's success at Villa purely because they also got Monchi in as the sporting director, and they spend, I think it's 94% of their revenue on their wages, which, unless they get back in the Champions League or win something, is going to bite them hard in the next year or two?
I mean, I think Emery is a brilliant manager, and he's been getting results on a shoestring budget for years and years, I do think that's the type of manager we need, mainly because, like an Emery and even like Ans, has a lot of experience with the running of a club, and that's what our biggest problem is. Basically, the actual structure and internals of the whole club machine towards football is completely broken, and Munn is certainly not a man for it. If you would,
Jorri, we don't know what Scott Munn does, do we?
No,
we
that's
don't.
what I mean. Like, Munn is not the man for it. He's not doing that. That's not what we would know if there were being if these issues were being fixed on an organizational level. We would be hearing about it, seeing the result of it. What we're not seeing is actually what we've been seeing since you've come in. And I'm not saying it's on him. I'm just saying the bad trend that we've been seeing in the club has continued and gotten worse. Some can put it on Anne, some can put it on the coaches, some can put it on the players. But I'm saying at least Scott Munn, as the footballing director, is not stopping that phenomenon in our club. So,
but I'm sure he would argue, wouldn't he? Well, I appointed Johan Lange. He is the head of recruitment, and the recruitment's actually been okay.
Then Lange is not stopping that. That's still under Scott Munn, but it doesn't matter. It could go down to Hans. It could go down to Kulusevski. The running of the club with all the layers, there's nothing really turning that trend around at this moment. If you were to ask me instead, what would I think would be the most realistic shot at really fixing these internals, which I think are the main issue? Because once again, I think we have a great squad. We have the building of we can do something great with these boys if we do the right thing. If we don't mess it up as an organization, we can do something great with these boys, in my view. I would say for example, getting Potts back, and I'm not advocating that, but Potts has intimate knowledge of the club and has a lot of experience in high-level international football. So he would, like an Emery, they know how it's supposed to be. They know, as soon as this is not doing that, that's because of this and so on. So they will become a kind of executive in terms of running the football things as well, And I think this is probably one of Ant's greatest strengths.
Yeah, I agree, actually.
And also, if you were then to couple it with, for example, Fabio as a real sporting director with the checkbook, then I think you would be more than halfway home in terms of turning this into a real contender, like we talk about Liverpool is run and stuff like that. Then I think that and I'm not saying it should be these guys. I'm just saying this is two guys that are associated with Tottenham that would fit that. Emery would fit that as well. If we want to put a young name out there, a young-ish manager, Silva, I think is closer to that. Probably is closer to that than Areola. I think Areola is probably a little bit more of a risk than Silva. Silva is,
in a weird way, it's come full circle, hasn't it? Where because Silva had a disappointment at Everton, you'd almost look at it and be like, well, actually, if you look at how Everton did since he left his job there, then you'd say he didn't do badly there at all.
Exactly.
And
I mean,
what Silva really has done well at Fulham actually is kind of make players who aren't young, exciting talents better. Players who are kind of more journeyman players
exactly.
or have been elsewhere, and he's kind of molded them into an impressive team. Yeah, he has actually jumped my list ahead of Thomas Frank. When Thomas Frank was quite high on my list, but when Brentford played Spurs, I was so shocked at just how direct they were that I was like, I'm not sure. I know that he changes things up for different teams, but
yeah, I think I do think Thomas Frank is a great manager as well. But my biggest thing there is that Thomas Frank is very opportunistic and is very practical. Like through his career, he does play very attacking in some, but he's the pragmatic. Like he will choose the approach he feels is the best for the job, but. What I do think is culturally, Thomas Frank would probably himself get upset with. Like I know Danish people would never, like, they would be so offended by all, like, the concessions, like the senior, like all of these commercial things. And now you go into all of the the hidden stuff that we don't see. I think it would very quickly come to a head with Thomas Frank. To be honest, we saw it with Frank Andersen. That's another Dane. And like this kind of
he didn't show particularly moral high standing himself.
No, that's I'm not saying Danish people are more or Scandinavian people or anything. Absolutely not more morally, but they are more confrontational in this regard, And I think Tottenham culture is to our detriment too unconfrontational, to be honest.
Yes, actually, that's a really good point, because that came out in a great Athletic article a few weeks ago, which is talking about how basically nobody. It's like the way you talk about when people get really famous, nobody around them says no anymore, and it seems like nobody around Levy and Donna Cullen and that little group of four, I think it is, at the very top, nobody says no to them, and therefore they just continually make bad-looking decisions over and over again.
Absolutely, but also what they do, of course, they're very successful at what they do. It's, what they don't, like the football thing is then delegated in a corporate manner, and that's not working. So and to be honest, I do think probably Levy is getting mature. Like, of course, we hear the rumors about selling the club and stuff like that. But I also do think that if at any point, it's probably getting close now to a point where they understand that they need to be more hands off. And of course, that's never going to happen with the money, but with the running, maybe we have some hope there in that regard.
Just before we finish this off, let me just ask you a couple of things. Obviously, Christian Romero, Mickey van der Ven, and Solanke rumored to be kind of available for the squad tomorrow night against Alkmaar. How do you feel about Christian Romero magically getting fit again just in time for Argentina?
Yeah, Madrid can have him. That we do not need more points of inconsistency. That's the thing. We just need to go. What are our inconsistency? Richarlison, you're a great guy. You fight for us when you're on the pitch. You're never on the pitch. Sorry, you need to go. And so on. Just go through it. Mason, you're a great guy. Blah blah blah.
Jorri, we don't know anything about right. We don't know what he does. I don't know why. I have to say, I don't know why we blame him for anything.
He's the offensive coach, and
we scored more goals than anybody else.
We are underperforming our XG like to new European records. So I do think that if there's ever going to be a metric that you're going to judge an offensive coach, it would be the amount of goals that the most highline front foot football team in Europe is scoring, and it's not really impressive. That's really, I
think we're second or third in the league on goals scored, aren't we?
Yeah, but we're still underperforming our XG, and we see it's not enough for us to hold. So we know this. We score 2 goals easily in every game. maybe even 3. But we need 4 or 5 because of how we play our football, because of our defense, because of our absolutely non-existent midfield, and so on. So you could say I'm putting too much on the offensive burden, but that's not me putting it on. That's the AND system is putting very high responsibility on scoring a lot of goals, but not even scoring a lot of goals. I mean, it's just getting the XG and the goals to be somewhere in parity would be nice, So because if the XG is lower, but we're still scoring around that would hopefully mean that we're not taking the same amounts of risk as well,
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay, and based on you saying that you can, talking us about us being the favourites for the Europa League, I assume then you think over the 2 legs against Alkmaar will be too strong for them?
Yeah. I mean, I ask you, Barnaby, is there any way that we could accept going out to that?
No,
especially now at this point when we're getting players back and stuff like that.
There's no way we could accept it as a fan base, and I don't think the board would accept it. But can I potentially see it happening? Yes, because the games we've struggled in more than any are the ones where teams play organized against us. And in a weird way, I actually think, this is me obviously being cynical and superstitious more like, and a classic Spurs. I'm like, oh, well, PSV lost 7-1 at home to Arsenal last night. The Dutch team are going to make sure that doesn't happen to them. So they'll be even more organized and defensive. And I think, I'm sure we'll have a lot of the play. But could I also see it tomorrow night, them nicking a 1-0 win and then it being a very edgy tie in a week's time at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium? Maybe.
Yeah, I actually kind of agree now that you mention it. I do agree with that part of it. And this is where we struggle. And this is where, the invert and the possession and all of that, it's not giving us any joy. This is where not having as much of the ball will help us, because we can then there is some disorganization in like we're not just running against 11 players in the box all the time, and that might be what we're facing. But also I do, in terms of the players' attitude and stuff like that, I do think that they will definitely be up for it. But I also like sometimes, as brilliant as Madison has been lately, like there's a dynamic there that kind of does changes, and not for the better when he's involved, I think. And I'm not putting in a.
You mean with his teammates or with the manager?
No, just the when Matters is on, like the rest of the team kind of basically lets him take over the show too much, and are not involved themselves enough, and so on. And Matters kind of demands it, so it's kind of reinforcing itself. And as brilliant as Matters is, even when in his best games, very often he's too long on the ball. He slows down our transition to a point where we need then to break down this block,
But can I just give you a devil's advocate to that? Sometimes when we don't have Matters coming to get the ball and taking responsibility, I find that we try and play the paradise ball so early once we've won the ball back that we just end up kicking it straight through to the goalkeeper all the time.
Absolutely. And that's one thing I'm baffled by. Is it simply because Ans has no belief in our midfielders, or why are we seeing? Because even with Ans ball, maybe even especially with Ans ball, having a strong formation in midfield is key, And for me, we have been leaving a gaping hole around the midfield circle for forever now, And I don't get it, because people are not running at the wings unless somebody is having a particularly bad game or is tired, like Porro and stuff. Yeah, they'll try and exploit it. But before they get there, they run right through the center of the midfield, and nobody's there to harass them.
Yeah, it only takes 1 or 2 passes, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I don't get it, because also on the transition to our offense, Bentancur has been up and down, and he's far from his best right now, but I feel like we're set up defensively in a way that Bentancur always ends up being behind the 6, basically, when he's supposed to be the transitional passer out of the defense. So he's basically too deep most of the time when he gets the ball to give that, because Bentancur is very good at making that. Like I would say Romero, Decky, who else? Some of the best, of course. Matters is definitely probably the best. Maybe Sonny can even be at times. But these guys, when they do the right pass, that's where we completely destroy team. We completely split them open.
Yeah.
And whether it's Bentancur, it's never going to be Bissouma in my view. I think Sa is more likely to do it than Bissouma. But whoever it is, they have to be in that hole then to create that pass. And I feel like structurally it's never really there. Whether it's on the players or how we set up, I won't judge that right now, but it's at least a consistent thing that I see again and again and again, so yeah.
In terms of, players who can play a final pass and make the right decision, that's quite relevant to something that came out in the last day or two. Fabrizio Romano was asked whether Spurs are interested still in signing Eze from Crystal Palace, and he said he's been on Spurs' list since 2023. He's always been highly rated at the club, but the release clause is very expensive and the payment for the clause has to be paid all up front. So that's what makes the deal difficult. And there are more clubs also keen. Do you foresee us going in for him or that type of player in the summer to try and fix some of those issues with, making the wrong decisions in midfield and trying to play, more regular, impressive final balls?
Yeah, I mean, he would be good to have for sure, but he of course, the injuries is not something that I'm looking forward to in Tottenham. Like with our records, and in terms of handling those kind of issues. Also, for me, yet again, it might not be what Ans wants, but I really, really want that 6. I want exactly that guy that can, because also if we're now maybe losing Romero, then for me, our weakest point in terms of going forward is the transition. It's too slow and it's all right on the wings. There's nothing going through the middle as well. We've become the crossing team once again. When at the start of its tenure, we had a lot of line splitting passes as well, and that that's dried up. Maddison does it when he's on a good game, but apart from Maddison, it's really not much happening. So for me, a 6 is really what we need. But yeah, we do need somebody. We need at least one of Eze's quality, I would say, to do that job. But I don't know if Eze is the guy, to be honest. I love seeing him when he plays. Like if we could keep him on the field, I would be absolutely over the moon having him. But
yeah, I think you're right. Another injury-prone player isn't what we need. Okay,
No.
Jorri, I'm gonna let you go now. But just for a little bit more superstition, I'm gonna add a little stat for you. AZ Alkmaar have won 8 of their last 9 two-legged European ties. So Tottenham are gonna have to break the data starting tomorrow night. It's obviously the 5:30 game. I'm going to give my little prediction now. I'm going to say it's going to be 1-1 tomorrow night. What's your prediction, Jorri?
I'm going to say I think maybe 3-1.
I'd take that. I'd love that. I'd love that, Jorri. I'd love that.
But I have to answer you then, Barnaby. Where are you at if we go out to them?
Well, I think if we go out to them, then I think that will be the time where the fan base all get together and agree that Postecoglou's just not right.
Yeah. But that means probably we would get, if we fire him before the end of the season, we would get a not the right choice for manager.
Well, but the season's done. So,
Yeah,
like I said
so
earlier, it would be
just
like
be
no
Mason.
relegation, no, but it probably wouldn't be Mason because I think Levy listens to social media enough where he'd be like, well, that
he
would be a
would be
bad
scared
move.
to do that.
So it'd probably be Matty Wells, and Mason would be asked to leave alongside Postecoglou, bizarrely, or it would be something weird like that. Don't forget, we're talking about the man who appointed Stellini.
Exactly. Yeah.
And yeah, so it would be another bizarre optical decision like that. But listen, Jorri, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it, guys. If you're watching on YouTube, please do make sure you press that like button, subscribe to the channel, getting closer and closer to 15,000 subscribers now. And also you can become a member. All the details how are in the description box below, just £1 a month. But yes, with just 1 day to go until that AZ Alkmaar win, hopefully we can go over to Holland, have a great night, and do similar to what that lot did down the road and score 5 or 6 or 7. I'll see you again.